Okay, this is part 2. Welcome back.
Yes.
To the deposition of Gary Hargrave. The most riveting hour of your day thus far, I'm sure.
It is very dry and very boring in part, but...
That's Gary's fault, not our fault.
Not
right?
our fault.
Welcome to the whatever podcast this is.
Are we going to change the title or are we good with?
We love Oops, I'm in a Cult.
What is this podcast about though, Charity?
John Robert Stevens.
The Living Word.
The Walk.
It's cults. It's cons.
And corn.
According to Gary, the Living Word became devoid of the presence of the Lord under his leadership. And I love that that is on court record.
I know.
You're going to watch as two former cult members try to de-dumbify themselves by doing a podcast about the cult that they were involved in their entire life.
Thought it was a church, turned out it was a cult. Oh, there's a good tagline.
That's what it is. That's it.
Oops, I'm in a cult.
Part 1 of this was 3 sections that we read from Gary Hargrave's deposition in the lawsuits that have been going on for the past 5 years. They recently finished the lawsuits, and so they posted hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of documents online. We got these documents donated to us by a listener and former member who
purchased them,
purchased them, which was, cost money because it's like 50 cents a page or $1 a page or something like that.
Yeah, so thank you to that person.
Yeah,
who you are.
A lot of money and really helpful for us to be able to understand what's going on. This is the deposition of Gary. They sit him down. It's like an interview where they have to...
Sworn testimony, right?
Sworn testimony, essentially, where they are entitled, the lawyers that are representing the plaintiffs in the lawsuit are entitled to an answer from Gary to their questions.
Yes.
So this puts Gary in this position where he has to answer.
Mm-hmm. He tries very hard not to.
And he tries very hard not to.
That's why it was 2 days long, or I don't know, 500 pages at least.
Yes, so. That's why there's a ton of this in here. So the first 2 sections that we did a fun little shirtless.
And then we weren't shirtless.
We weren't shirtless, although we should have been. For
the Apostolic company was shirtless.
That's right. The leadership of the church was shirtless and playing some titty grabbing game, and so Gary had to go over that. We also talked about Nephilim and Rick's affairs. In this episode, the second part of it, we have 2 big chunks. And what are those 2 big chunks there, Charity?
The concept of submission within the Living Word Fellowship and Apostolic fathering ministry. Was Gary in charge or was he not?
Who the boss?
Who the boss?
Okay, so we are picking up, again, Charity is playing the lawyer, and I am playing Gary Hargrave.
So sorry. Took one for the team.
That's right. And this one is about what? Sorry.
This is about submission. And just what I wanted to say for those that aren't former members, you've probably gathered if you've been listening to us up until now, but submission, the idea of submitting yourself as a person, your life choices, your everything to someone in authority above you was a key concept of the Living Word Fellowship. I mean, we were essentially told that this is what you have to do in order to walk with God. And certainly it was, if not mandatory, it was highly, highly encouraged. And you'll see, we'll give you some examples of the kind of manipulation that was used around that, where technically it wasn't mandatory to be a part of the fellowship, but you suffered if you did not do it.
And the manipulation continues in this deposition. At least it's there's an attempt to it.
Yeah.
And we did do a whole episode early on about designated relationships and this shepherding system, and we called it a system of control. Watch that episode to understand more. Listen to that episode to understand more. And then let us get infuriated. Are we ready?
Yes. 4, 3, 2, 1.
We are starting 204, bottom?
Yep.
Okay, go ahead.
Let's talk about the concept of submission. Submission was a key concept that was envisioned by John. Is that correct?
Yes.
Because there's a concept that John talked about that there's a danger of having an independent spirit. Is that right?
Yes. We're talking about John Robert Stevens here, the founder of the Living Word Fellowship, when they say John.
Yes. And you used the phrase earlier, a divine order. Is that right?
Yes.
Part of what John was doing when he envisioned the Apostolic Company was creating a structure for the divine order. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
A way for the churches to relate to the Apostolic Company, right?
Yes. As well as the local church structure.
Correct. And so it also governed the structure within each particular church, right?
Can you repeat that?
Yeah, John's vision didn't just have a vision for how the church is related to APCO, as you described. He also had a vision for how the church would structure within itself, the local church.
Yes.
And again, the concept to be a Christian within the meaning of the Living Word Fellowship is to submit oneself to the Word. Is that fair to say?
To the lordship of Christ.
Through the Word?
No.
Okay.
All right, let's pause here. 70 years, y'all did it wrong.
Oops.
All of us former members, that was wrong. You did it, everything that we did it all wrong.
We did through the Word. No.
We missed it all. We missed the whole thing. Okay, go on.
Okay, well, how do you submit yourself to the Lordship of Jesus Christ within the Living Word Fellowship?
The Scriptures, prayer life, Holy Spirit.
Bullshit.
I just never heard that before. The sermons would have been so short.
Oh my God, right?
Scriptures, prayer life, Holy Spirit.
You
See you
need to buy
later.
all those tapes.
Yeah, all these tapes. What a waste. Okay. There's actually a lot of reasons why they're a waste here. You'll find out more later. Go on.
So John Stephen's word had nothing to do with it?
No, it was a part.
What was the part?
It is a part. There was a piece.
It was a principal piece. Is that fair to say?
For me, it was, but I can't speak for everybody in the fellowship.
Again, laugh. Insert laugh here. My question was, is everybody on the same level within the fellowship, or is the fellowship... Okay, so sorry. This is
that was the end
jumping
of that
ahead.
section.
That was the end of that section.
Yeah.
So is everybody on the same level within the fellowship, or is the fellowship made up of essentially shepherds and sheep?
Objection, blah, blah, blah. Well, within the divine order structure, I would say the congregation and the divine order structure, yes.
Is it just me, or is that a really convoluted answer?
Yeah, it's just yes is the answer.
Yes, okay. So yes meaning shepherds and sheep?
Apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, teachers, local shepherd, elders, deacons, deaconesses. There is a functioning order to the local church, and that was the authority structure. You have that, and then you would have, congregants, and there weren't necessarily functioning in any of those commissions.
Congregants that weren't necessarily functioning in any of this. Okay, so the congregants are the sheep.
Yes.
And they would have a shepherd that they are in a relationship with. That's part of the divine order, right?
They would have a pastoral ministry, probably, yes, one or two.
How about a shepherd?
Yes.
What would you call it within the fellowship? An Elijah-Elisha relationship?
A pastor, a mentor. It had a different way in which it functioned within. Again, they're talking about a lot of different ways that the local churches were free to establish their authority structure.
I understand. So let's get through the authority structures, because it sounds like you have pretty wide, broad-based knowledge about what the churches were doing. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
So you've got the congregant level, they're the sheep, and somebody who's a sheep would have a shepherd that they would be in a relationship with. Is that right? Yes or no?
No.
What? Would they have something called an Elijah-Elisha relationship?
Not necessarily.
I mean, people could just do whatever the fuck they wanted. I don't know. I wasn't around much, or just... Have you ever heard that phrase?
Oh, definitely.
Have you ever heard the phrase designated relationship?
Yes.
Would you refer to that sort of congregant next level up relationship as a designated relationship within the fellowship?
Not necessarily.
Was there such a thing as a designated relationships within the local churches?
Yes.
What was that?
That was a mentoring type relationship. It was a terminology that was used, especially within the young people, not wanting to relate to a pastor or somebody older. So it was looking for someone who could relate to them as a mentor.
So if I'm a kid, 12, 13, 14 years old, I may not feel comfortable relating to a pastor who's older, maybe has a family and are more experienced. I may be more comfortable talking to somebody older than me but closer in age. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
So there was a system of a designated relationship I would have with somebody who's 20, 22, 25. Is that it? Am I summarizing it okay?
Not mandatorily, but you're describing it.
He's very careful to say not mandatorily. Okay. Was it encouraged by the Apostolic Company?
I think it was encouraged that people have mentors, yes.
Was that specifically what was called designated relationships, right?
Yes. I mean, to me, that was a terminology during a time that wasn't,
At what time was designated relationship used?
Well, I would say during the time of the Young Adult School of Prophet, which would take place into maybe the late 90s.
Okay, and what about outside of that time frame? Was it ever referred to as an Elijah-Elisha relationship?
Elijah-Elisha relationship is it's a biblical story.
Yeah, no shit, Gary. I understand. I'm just saying what I think the lawyer wanted to say, right? I understand. What I'm asking is, was that terminology, I get it comes from the Bible. It's an Old Testament thing, right? I get it. But was it used based on the scripture to describe a particular type of relationship within the fellowship?
Objection, blah, blah, blah. It was used to describe a basic type of relationship. Whether that was limited to the fellowship, no.
So all of you out there in the public, if you have a designated relationship, please write in, because we'd like to know, is this a widely known concept of having a DR?
Yeah, everybody's got a designated relationship out there.
Yes, that's what they call them too, right? Labeled as this is my designated relationship.
Exactly.
Again, I'm not asking outside the fellowship. I just want to know if you can tell us what it means, not the biblical origins, but in practice. What was an Elijah-Elisha relationship within the context of the fellowship?
Okay, I love that this is just, again, this is what we were talking about, is it's like you can't just go up and mumble your bullshit. In going through the tapes that I've been doing for various reasons for the podcasts, et cetera, and like trying to find Gary like defining shit, it is an hour and a half of him yapping on and not getting nothing to the point.
Yeah.
And not saying it clearly like this. He's like, you get what I'm saying, right? This is so satisfying to see him be like, cool. Answer the question.
Exactly.
Okay. Okay, the answer. I would say if someone wanted to, as I did with John Stevens, wanted to develop a relationship where I was being trained, mentored by his ministry, I could refer to that as an Elijah-Elisha type relationship, or as a Paul-Timothy type of relationship.
Okay, spiritual father.
That would work.
At the sort of sheep level, congregant level, that designated relationship, DR, have you heard people refer to it as a DR sometimes?
Yes.
Shepherd, you've heard that, right?
Yes.
Within the fellowship, right?
Yes.
All of those are synonyms, DR, designated relationship, Elijah, Elisha, right?
No.
They're not synonymous.
No, they're not synonymous.
How are they different?
Well, somebody who has a mentoring relationship was not really seen as a spiritual oversight of the designated authority of divine order. So again, it was a mentoring type relationship. Someone who was a shepherd generally was one who was moving under a specific commission.
And if you're all confused, so were we, because every decade it changed.
It changed all the time, but essentially stayed the same.
Yeah, exactly. Just the labels. So, okay, this is moving on to what are chain of relationships.
Yeah.
What's a chain relationship? Chain of relationships. Ever heard that phrase?
Yes.
What does it mean?
It means there's a divine order structure, and part of the divine order structure was within each church corporation, which was on that level of the directors of the corporation, the officers of the corporation. Usually there was an advisory council within the organization, and that was the authority structure and the hierarchical structure of that church corporation. And those individuals had to function according to their bylaws.
So is it your testimony that the chain of relationships has nothing to do outside of the officers and directors of the local church?
No.
What else does the chain of relationships refer to?
That's where we stopped, actually.
Oh.
Is the no.
Oh, because then Gary blathers on about evangelists, prophets, and teachers again.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, so within any given local church, was there a system of chain of relationships that was designed for the entirety of the congregation?
Objection. I would say no, because each church could establish whatever chain within that local church they felt was the Lord's leading. Interesting response, Gary. So we thought we'd help him out.
Take a trip back in time.
He's older now, so he maybe forgot everything over the past 40 years of what he's been doing.
His life's work.
His life's work.
Don't remember it.
I don't know. No. They could do whatever they want. So let's take a listen to what Gary had to say about this.
Back in the day.
People know what we're doing. People in the churches know what we're supposed to be doing right now, right? We're supposed to be giving ourselves to the Christ in one another in relationships and serving the Christ in one another. So everybody knows what we're doing. Isn't that amazing? That may be the first time in the churches where we really know what we're doing.
Okay, so when he says no, because each church could establish whatever chain within the local church they felt was the Lord's leading, and he's like, no, people know what we're doing. In the local churches, they know what we're doing. We are submitting ourselves to the Christ in one another, that which is which Gary doesn't think it's synonymous. It is chain of relationships, Christ in the flesh, Elijah, Elisha. We know what we're doing.
Yeah.
And anyways.
And here he's like, no, every church could do what they want.
They could do whatever they want.
No structure.
In court, he says they could do whatever they want. Or in, the deposition, he says they could do whatever they want.
Behind the pulpit.
Behind the pulpit, when he had all the congregants listening to him, it was do what I want.
Exactly.
Okay, continue.
What was John's vision with respect to the chain of relationships within the local churches?
I don't have detail of that.
What was your vision for the same thing?
My detail was that there was a faith that people would grow in their relationship with Christ, with God the Father. As people grew and matured, they would be able to function in the gift of the Holy Spirit. They would be able to have a greater understanding and interpretation of the Word of God on their own. And to me, my vision was that this has always been, in John Stephen's mind, a personal walk with the Lord and a personal revelation of the Lord under the Lordship of Jesus Christ. That would be the ultimate chain of relationships, that we would all come directly under Christ.
And you would come directly under Christ by connecting with your designated relationship, who connects with their shepherd, who connects with the pastor, who connects with the apostolic company, who connects with the fathering ministry. Do I have that right?
I say you get there by growing and maturing in your one-on-one relationship with Christ. And hopefully some of those people are an assistance and the help for you to get to that maturity.
Okay, and so the way the attorney lines this out, and you would come directly under Christ by connecting with your DR,
It's beautiful.
He says it exactly how we experienced it, and Gary's like,
exactly.
Not really. I mean, it's more loosey-goosey.
Yeah. Okay. Let's listen to what the next line is, because that goes right
on 220.
Well, it starts with a question.
Okay, I just want to make sure I understand. Are you saying there was not a body-wide concept that everybody in the church, meaning members and congregants, should connect in through submission and obedience to a designated relationship or shepherd? Yes or no?
I think it's too overbroad.
Are you suggesting that what I described was not a feature of the fellowship?
In the terminologies you're suggesting, it's too cut and dried to this is mandatory. And I think that's the...
You do this, you do that.
You do this, you do that. Do the other thing, you submit to this person, you submit to that person, or you can't be part of the fellowship. There were people who were in submission to nobody that were a part of the fellowship.
Okay. And technically, he's correct. However.
Yeah, but that was not the instruction, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. The attorney's saying there wasn't this body-wide concept. It wasn't this prominent, piece.
He's asking, yeah.
Yeah, he's asking. And Gary's but
he's like, no, it's not that cut and dry. It's not mandatory. It's not you do this and you do the other thing and you submit to this person and you can't be part of the fellowship. Okay, listen to what Gary said in 2000.
You better get a relationship that is going to mentor you and bring you into being a Joshua or a Timothy or an Elisha with that spirit, or you may end up being the next Balaam. That, to me, is how important. This is like Walk with God 101.
I just love that line at the end. This is like Walk with God 101. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What are you doing? If the whole thing is that you're supposed to be, this, it is, anyways, that's him saying, you better get, it starts with, you better get a relationship. Or you be the next
Balaam. It's it's such manipulation. It's such coercion, Mm-hmm. It's like that whole thing of, you don't have to do it, but if you don't, you're the next fucking Balaam.
Yeah, this is like Walk with God 101. So if you're not doing 101, then
you ain't walking with God.
And that really is it. It is a love relationship with the anointed, with the one that's really anointed, that's going to teach them and train them and bring them and keep them in line with what it is that God's really doing. And so this is good tonight. I think it's good that we have emphasized again this step one, because it is so very foundational to us, and it's right that we don't go on before we really achieve this in our own hearts and find this. And the Lord keeps encouraging us, find this relationship in your life.
It's foundational. Find this relationship in your life. Mm-hmm. That's instructions. That's how to do it. Obviously, no one was tied down and forced to be in a relationship, but this is exactly, let's go continue, because he asked the question that he's asking now.
Yeah, so he's going into all these circles and finally let's get to the point.
Yeah,
he says I understand that. I'm just asking you, you're trying to take it to the conclusion, or I'm saying something I'm not. I'm just asking you, within what your vision was for the fellowship, was there a concept of obedience and submission to a designated relationship, and that to perfect your relationship with Christ in the walk, that you should be connected in through those relationships?
I believe that helped people grow up and mature in their relationship with the Lord. Yes.
So you promoted it.
Yes.
You spoke about it, right?
In some terms, yes.
In fact, you delivered whole sermons on it, right?
I'm not recalling anything, but probably. Okay.
Did you all hear that? He says, I'm not recalling anything, but probably. He doesn't recall that he brought whole sermons on it.
In fact, you delivered whole sermons on it, right? I think it was like nonstop.
Nonstop. I mean, there's probably hundreds of tapes where he's talking about this concept.
Non-stop. Okay, here's a fun little supercut, which maybe I'm going to re-edit before we actually publish this, but...
Shepherding, old term, new definition. We're going to talk about Christ in you, Christ in the flesh. But what you first have to do is understand the definition of relationship. Who are you submitting to? Who's submitting to you? Who are you shepherding? Who's shepherding you? Shepherding one another. Shepherd. Better get a relationship. This little relationship concepts. You have a relationship by virtue of a relationship. By that relationship, write down 10 relationships. Designated relationship, submitting that as a chain of relationships. To come and serve me. Divine order in submission. And remember, we are talking about a very key central principle to our walk with God and to our uniqueness as a people. Elijah and Elisha relationship. The Elisha of a relationship. Relationship. Through the relationship of Elijah's with Elisha's. Elisha and an Elisha ministry in a relationship. Elisha serving Elijah of Elijah in a relationship. And Elisha with Elisha relationship. I'm your shepherd. What does it automatically position you as? A sheep.
Okay, is that enough?
I mean, there's so many. It's like...
That's just like a solid... I mean, like, come on. It's just, I'm not recalling anything. I just send that to him. Okay, let's keep moving.
222.
222, go ahead.
You delivered whole sermons on the concept of shepherding and how important it was, correct? So now he's saying...
Oh, shit, sorry. I wanted to play more Elijah-Elisha relationship stuff.
With Elisha. Of Elijah relationship.
Correct.
So wait, just like a second ago, he said, I don't remember.
I don't remember anything.
And now he's like, oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
It was something that was part of your vision for the fellowship, right?
Yes.
Is there some reason why you don't want to talk about it today? And then defense counsel objects.
Objection. Okay, go ahead. Ask the question again.
I'm just asking if there's any reason why you wouldn't want to talk about that today.
No, you're asking me a question in terminologies that I can't give a yes or no answer to. You got to use terminologies I understand, like
We're going to talk about Christ in you, Christ in the flesh. Shepherding, old term, new definition.
You got to get a definition of relationship. Okay.
Okay, moving forward. What's an independent spirit, Gary?
Yes.
What is an independent
hold on.
spirit?
I'm not ready yet.
Okay.
Objection. Okay, go ahead. What was it? Sorry.
What's an independent spirit?
Oh, somebody who is independent, off on their own.
Not in the chain of relationship.
Or not submissive to the lordship of Jesus Christ. It could apply to outside the fellowship of the living word.
But I want to talk about it within the fellowship of the living word for the 100th time, Gary.
For the 100th time, that's what we're here talking about.
If somebody has an independent spirit within the fellowship, that means that they're not submitting to their shepherd. Is that right?
Objection, not necessarily.
Is that one meaning?
Could be.
Okay, what's another meaning of an independent spirit within the fellowship of the living word?
Somebody who is doing their own thing on many levels, whether it be in their spiritual life, their life in the scriptures, whatever. It's not directly pinning something to somebody who's not submitting to an authority necessarily.
I heard that phrase so many times, though, of like, oh, they're just doing their own thing. Like, I don't know, said to me, doing your own thing.
Doing their own thing.
There's different things that somebody can do to show that they're acting with an independent spirit.
Yes.
Okay, like you said, one of the things is not submitting to their shepherd. That's one example of somebody acting with an independent spirit. Is that fair to say?
Well, again, I have a hard time with the terminology because to me, it conveys the fact that every person had a shepherd and were supposed to submit to their shepherd. The way the church functioned was the church itself had a pastor or shepherds. If you chose to go to that church, that person was the pastor or the shepherd of the church. So you could say you were under that. But I think you're reaching for something more concrete as saying, if you're in the church, then you've got to go do what this guy tells you. And if you're not doing that, then you're independent. That, to me, I would say no.
Bonkers.
Okay, so just in case you're feeling like you're being gaslit right now, let's see what Gary had to say about this in the early 2000s.
Everyone has to be in submission, and everybody should have someone who's in submission to them. That'll be a picture that begins to reflect the true body as this leadership really becomes established in our midst. We'll literally see that everyone will have someone that they are submissive to and someone that is submissive to them.
So, yeah, there. I mean, you were supposed to be submissive to somebody, right?
Right. Yeah.
That was it.
But
everybody has to be in submission.
yeah, he literally just said it. And the thing is, like, yes, he's not wrong that technically you could be a part of the fellowship and not do that, but nobody fucking talked to you. You weren't included in anything. You weren't
a part of the fellowship if you weren't doing this.
Person.
He said it was Walk 101.
Uh-huh.
This is like, it's so foundational to who we are.
Yeah.
Everybody has to be in submission. You need to get into a relationship. This is what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
He's like saying all that stuff. And now it's like, well, you didn't have to do it.
You didn't have to do it. No.
You didn't have to do it. Okay.
But part of your teachings was that you wanted people to voluntarily submit themselves to their shepherd, right? I'm asking, as part of your teaching, were you teaching that people should voluntarily submit themselves to their shepherd?
It would be my hope that people would submit themselves to whatever spiritual authority they were under within the context of the organization they were in.
And there was a concept within the fellowship of spiritual parenting or spiritual father, as you've talked about, right?
Not as, again, not as a wholesale, everybody had a spiritual father. Would people understand the terminology spiritual father? Of course, it's a biblical term. And so you would understand that terminology. Did people come in and get a name tag and sign up and be put under a shepherd? No.
But if people voluntarily submitted themselves to shepherding, the church would assign them a shepherd. Is that right?
The shepherd would be, as I explained, the shepherd was, or pastor of the church was the pastor of the church. If you want to submit yourself to the authority of the church by free will of choice, then that person is a shepherd. If I go to the Catholic Church, the father that is in the Catholic Church, if I want to receive communion and have confessional, then I go to that father because he's the father of that church, not because somebody assigned him to me. I assigned him myself voluntarily to be a part of the congregation.
Okay, but again, like I remember a whole time period where it was literally like, you had to choose if you wanted to be a part of things. Like you had to choose who's going to be your.
That was the constant pressure.
Elijah.
It's like go find your Elijah. That was the word from Gary was go find your Elijah. You have to be plugged in. Everybody has to be in submission. Everybody has to be submitting to the Christ. They have to have this Elijah-Elisha relationship. It's Walk 101. That was being pushed at the top. All the shepherds that I voluntarily was a part of the congregation then came in and stuck you with an Elijah-Elisha. They paired you up. Yeah. We've seen lists of people. We've heard about spreadsheets
lists
where it's
of people,
like
who's assigned to who,
who's assigned to who, and like make sure everybody's plugged in, make sure they're paired up with the right person. Like it all's got to go through. You got to submit over here, you got to submit over there, all the way down. You know, kids were submitting to adults, and adults were committing, like full 40-year-old men were submitting to 20-year-old men. You know, like it's just mess. It was, everybody was a part of this whole thing. That was part of the teaching. Everybody had to be plugged in.
And that's what I wish he would just like admit that it was a big part of the culture. And he's trying to downplay it so hard. And it's like, you ever hear the term subnouncing? That I would hear shepherds making fun of people who didn't submit things, that just said, hey, this is what I'm going to do. And they'd be like, oh, they subnounced it.
Yes.
Like
Exactly.
I
think, I mean, like we're going to keep doing this in this episode, but we have just every single episode we do this. Every single episode we're talking about this system that Gary's denying even existed.
Yeah.
In like any real way.
Would you like to introduce The new intern. This is my new.
You want me to scoop him?
Yeah, scoop him.
Come here, bud.
This is our new intern.
Oh, Sir Borks-a-lot.
This is Sir Borks-a-lot, my dog Ziggy.
Hello, I will be
He's
playing the part of Gary Hargrave.
We wouldn't do that to you, buddy. We wouldn't do that to you. Okay, if you're gonna stay in here, you gotta behave. You wanna lay down? Oh my god, you're so cute. I love you. Come here. Okay, you're good. All right, so.
So where are we picking up back here?
264. Part of what you were teaching for years was that the congregants and members of the churches should voluntarily submit themselves to the authority of the shepherd, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and that concept of submission created a culture where people would submit lots of things about their lives to their shepherds, correct?
Not everybody, no.
I didn't say everybody.
Okay.
I'm just saying that this is the culture that was created, was that people would submit where they should go to college, right?
No, not always.
I didn't say always. Was it common?
You could.
Somebody would submit to their shepherd. Do you have a witness that I should go to X college?
Yes, you can pray with me over my going to college. And generally, part of the teaching was you were to have your own witness and you were going for confirmation, not for a dictated direction.
Really, Gary?
Okay, let's play this other clip.
Not for a dictated direction.
You are telling each other how to think. You're telling each other how to relate. You're telling each other how to live life in its simplest forms. That, to me, is the concept of shepherding.
Okay.
This
You're telling each
cut
other
and dry.
how to think. You're telling each other how to live life. That's the concept of shepherding. Yeah.
That sounds a little more intense than, can you pray with me over my going to college?
Just pray with me over going to college.
Shit. Okay, well then, so.
Okay. I'm on 266.
So people would submit their relationships, right?
Yes.
They would ask if they should date somebody or not, right?
Sometimes.
In fact, that was something that was encouraged, wasn't it?
I would say getting premarital counsel and prayer was encouraged, yes.
That wasn't my question. My question was people were encouraged, if they were interested in another person they wanted to date, they should submit that to their shepherd, correct?
I think it was people's personal choice story. If they felt that it was a revelation to them or a part of their, relationship of the Holy Spirit and the Lordship of Christ, and they desired that, then yes, they submitted it.
My question wasn't what people felt. My question was, what were you teaching? Were you encouraging people to submit their relationships before they started dating? I'm just hoping I get an actual answer to this question.
There's a lot of objections because a lot of asked and answered.
Was part of your teaching that the individuals who were wanting to date one another or starting a relationship should submit that to their shepherd for a witness?
Could. Mm-hmm.
Was part of the teaching that they should? No. Wow. I just want to understand. Is it? Oh wait, then it cuts us off again.
Yeah, it cuts out a page, but then.
Oh no, sorry, it was just backwards. Is it your testimony, 268?
Thank you.
Is it your testimony today that it wasn't something that you encouraged?
The way I'm hearing your question is it was like people were being told to do this. It was a requirement to do this, and you had to do this. And so I would say absolutely not.
But I never said that. I asked you.
But it's the...
Hang on one second. I asked you if you encouraged it as part of your teaching. That's all.
That's been asked and answered a few times.
If I can get your answer, what is the answer? Did you encourage it or didn't you?
I encouraged it on a volunteer basis. If people felt that that was the leading of the Lord in their personal life before God, yes, I encourage people to do that on that basis.
Slippery little fucker. Was there a process within the fellowship whereby a shepherd who received that kind of request from a congregant where they would send a request up to the Apostolic company for a witness on the same thing?
I'd say generally no. The local churches were independent local churches. They ministered to, pastored, shepherded their people within the context of their local church. Okay, couple things. That's the end of the designated relationship thing. So I think we both have some stories to address that. And I think any former member has a story to address that. That last thing he said, we'll revisit in a second before we jump into the next thing, because that's his stupid ass defense through the next thick pile of stuff. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to these questions of like this, was it part of your teaching that individuals who are wanting to date one another or starting a relationship should submit to their shepherd for a witness? And no, he says no. And of course he denies that. And there's all the questions of like, was it something that they required? And he's like, no, it's something they can volunteer to do. They just, if they wanted to, if they needed help from a shepherd, blah, 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 blah. For me, I could say that, the very little desire to be involved, especially once I was an adult. I was in the church for maybe 2 years after being 18. And yes, I was encouraged as a teen and whatever to plug in, and I reluctantly did sometimes, and it was this or that. But then when I actually had like a real life choice to make, I had no interest in asking for shepherd. I just wanted to go do it. I felt like, oh, this is what I wanted to do. It was a little reckless, I will say.
I mean, you're 18.
But only a little reckless. I was just moving to Canada. Like, that's it. It wasn't like I was like, I'm going to go do heroin or like, be a porn star or something like that. These were choices I was considering. But instead, I just wanted to go move to Canada because of a relationship. And I didn't ask to submit this. I was dragged into a room with the local shepherds and told and discouraged, do not do this. Mm-hmm. You're going to fuck your life if you do this. This wasn't a volunteer thing for me. Right. It was just like everybody was telling me, you have to go have a meeting with them. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I was 18. I had no reason to need to do that. They told me not to, and I did anyways. And it was the best decision I could have made.
Because it got you out of the cult.
Out. And I know that like you have something similar. There's one more thing I wanted to read in that actually before we were done.
Well, I also wanted to point out that too, that then later on they treated you like shit for it when you came back.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it was basically punished for, kind of just pushed aside.
Excluded, ostracized. And but that's very powerful when you're raised being told this is your family, this is how you walk with God. I mean, it's so intertwined, all of that stuff. So
yeah, there's that subtle punishment for not doing it the way that they wanted, for not submitting correctly, not listening to what they wanted me to do. And then just also on top of it, it's like, in practice, it was nothing like what he's saying it was like here. It's not like it when you listen to the audio tapes. He's saying everybody needs to do this. This is walk with God 101.
Well, and exactly. And did I ever tell you about when I was not coming around very much at the time the Elisha words came out. Yeah. And I remember hearing about those and I was like, oh no, I'm going to have to do that. Like, it's such a vivid memory for me because I knew if I was going to be accepted and included, I could not any longer be kind of like doing my own thing in any way, shape, or form. And I did do it. And that was some of the worst years of abuse I experienced in the church. This podcast is brought to you by us, your friendly neighborhood cult busters.
Oops, I'm in an advertisement. If you'd like to support our efforts and access exclusive bonus content,
like behind-the-scenes conversations,
let's put this behind us.
Access to our research and more,
head over to Supercast, where you can subscribe monthly or yearly.
It's exclusive, it's personal, it's behind the scenes.
All about the Living Word cult.
Going to the records department, trying to get filings for John Robert Stevens' divorce.
This is an unskippable advertisement.
Thanks, and enjoy the rest of the episode.
Okay, the last thing I want to read before, just reread it so that you know where we're jumping off from here into the APCO stuff. There's going to be plenty of this kind of stuff here, but he says the very last answer that he gave in this section that we're calling this, by the way, we mentioned this, I think, before. We are not reading this necessarily in the order that it was done in. No. We're just compiling it into topics and themes that, so it makes more sense as we're reading it through here. But he says, to the question, were you supposed to send a request to the Apostolic Company for witness on stuff? And he says, generally, I'd say no. The local churches were independent local churches. They ministered to, pastored, shepherded their people within the context of their local church. And that gets us into which is this apostolic fathering ministry topic. So apostolic fathering ministry is something that I would say just not only as a member, but also as somebody who like goes through all these tapes all the time, is not really a phrase that's used all that much. I think we would have in the church that you might hear those words and stuff, but generally it would just be like G&M or Gary and Marilyn. It was Mama and Papa, that stuff. But that's the technical term of the person that's in charge of everything. in this that they go into with all of this stuff. And so Gary is trying to, through all of this junk, trying to downplay the power that he had,
Yes, and the
him and Marilyn, and the
therefore.
responsibility. Exactly. So what's fun about it, so we'll read this first one that kind of gives you an idea of the way that he behaves through this whole thing, if you haven't caught on to it already. And we'll go from there. But there's also some really interesting stuff about Marilyn and John's relationship, and more beyond that. So let's take a...
So you delivered the word for a long time?
A long time.
How many years?
Well, from 1973 until the end of the fellowship.
After John Stevens died, there was an effort to preserve, well, actually it started before, there was an effort to preserve John's word, right?
To preserve the teachings, correct.
And to disseminate it?
Yes, disseminate it.
After he died, you delivered the word?
Yes.
And there was an effort to preserve your word?
That's correct.
When John spoke the word, it was considered within the fellowship the word of God, correct?
If you're comparing it to the scriptures, the word from God out of heaven, no. To say that people referred to as a word from God, yes. But to attach a meaning with that, that's, overbearing. It's incorrect, way incorrect.
Way incorrect.
I love that because it's just so like in his own answer, it's like, what the fuck does that mean?
Yeah.
It's like, no, it's not a word from God out of heaven, but it is a word from God. It's just you can't attach any meaning to that. That really doesn't mean anything. We just said it, apparently, whatever.
So dumb, evasive.
So dumb, so evasive. Okay, question.
I'm not saying that it is the word from God or it isn't. I just want to know, within the doctrine of the church, was there a particular significance given to John's word?
No.
Hilarious.
Yep.
That's me, not the
I mean,
attorney.
that was like the whole thing. There's no significance given to John's word. Again, no significance
and I
whatsoever.
think, aren't these like called this the word? This is
all the word.
They called it the word,
And
capital T, capital W.
Yeah, the word. And the name of the fellowship was the Living Word. Which wasn't just a made-up thing. It was about John's living word.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So he says, no, not within the doctrine. There was no doctrine of the church about John's message. Okay.
Messages.
One of the greatest conflicts we've ever seen is the conflict surrounding John the man, because you didn't embrace the word disattached from the fact that God was bringing that word, that living word in a human vessel.
And we know there's a million examples of John talking about it, even Gary himself talking about it. As former members, we understand. I worked in the audio booth. The whole reason I was there was to preserve John's word. And because it was a living word from God, this is just an example of Gary acknowledging that on stage, that like God was bringing a living word through a human vessel. Mm-hmm. John was that human vessel, right?
Mm-hmm. And then him.
Okay, what's the next question?
Did John refer to having God's word in his mouth?
And Gary says, in those terms, I can't answer that question.
Well, did you?
So I would like to refresh Gary's memory here.
This age is being framed by a word of God in my mouth.
Okay.
That's John Stevens.
That's John Stevens literally saying, this age is being framed by a word of God in
my mouth.
Okay, so I hope Gary...
Bold
I thought
statement.
Gary was like a good studier of John's word. I thought he understood that stuff from top to bottom. Apparently he wasn't paying attention. Didn't he start like a whole university that was like meant to research John's word and teach it?
Well, did you ever refer to John being a vessel for delivering God's word?
Yes.
So he does.
We did just hear that.
We did just hear that. Did you ever... Oh, this one's my favorite. Did you ever refer to yourself as the vessel delivering God's word?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, never?
Not in my recollection. I don't think of myself that way.
I mean, just even the fact that like it's called, most churches call it a sermon and they call it the word.
The word, yeah.
Okay, so I'm not asking if you think of yourself that way. I'm asking if you ever said it. Have you ever referred to the word coming out of your mouth as effectively the word delivered by God and you were the vessel?
I can't answer that because it's too twistable.
I'm not trying to twist. I just want to understand whether you have referred to yourself as the vessel delivering God's word.
I believe that I read the scriptures. I study the scriptures and I look to the Lord through the Holy Spirit for enlightenment on those scriptures. And I bring teachings based on what I believe the word of God is saying. different than my opinion of what you're trying to say. Does God climb down out of heaven and speak to me, and then I go and be a mouthpiece of that? No. I've never, to my knowledge, referred to myself in that context.
That's such a lie. It would always be like, God's really speaking to us.
Yeah, that was
That
regular.
would say him and Marilyn, and this is what it is.
Yeah, there's hundreds. This is part of the deal with this is like I was saying earlier, like going through all this stuff, like trying to find an exact soundbite of Gary saying exactly the thing that like we all knew is hard. But I can think of a million times where he's just like, I was on my way over here and like God spoke to me or whatever kind of stuff. And that was the whole implication of this, is that like Gary was bringing a word, like that's what bringing a word, like bringing it from where? From the fucking mountaintop. He was coming down with a word that was supposed to be the word from God. And it's why we were supposed to follow it and all of that stuff. So let's just play one clip that I was able to find in our preparation for this.
But I'll give you the most central, important answer. Is people's relationship with this current word that the Lord's speaking. It's just the fact. It has nothing to do with his choosing of a vessel. But the greatest way that I could do you a disservice and do these churches a disservice is not to bring this word.
Right. So
he's bringing the word.
He's bringing the word.
He's bringing the word
like,
of God.
The word is really important. It doesn't matter the vessel it comes out of.
It just happens to be me.
It just happens to be me. And so the greatest disservice I could bring you is not bringing this word. And it's just, I know, again, like what you want him to scream is like, I am bringing the living word from God, to like counter this.
Which
but
I'm sure it's on some tape somewhere, but it's hard to find.
It's just that like we all knew it. He said it so many times. You didn't even need to know it because John was already that vessel. Gary, as we see in this thing, that's what he becomes, is the one who takes on the ministry of the word. And the word was about who was the person communing with God so that we could all know the thoughts of God. Yeah. And Gary was that person.
Exactly.
Okay.
Now, I just want to make sure I understand. Was John's word treated differently than other people who were pastors within the church?
I would say in the sense that his messages were recorded and preserved, yes.
Okay. So the continuing effort to preserve John's word.
It wasn't as much of a preservation concept. The messages were being put on CD, cassette tapes, and mailed out to people. That was really the purpose of it, was distribution. Okay, I find that incredibly offensive. And I think anybody that bought those tapes and understood why they were buying the tapes, not just to listen to on the way to work or whatever. And maybe, my perspective of it from working in the audio booth was a completely different thing. But the whole purpose of the Living Word building, the whole purposes of why Rick was able to spend so much money on audio equipment, the Living Word Church in the Valley was like literally the best audio that like a church, especially a church of that size, had. I mean, they spent like so much money on all that equipment. When we were in the booth, the recording equipment was like quadruple. You couldn't even have a second.
It wasn't just one backup.
Yeah, it wasn't like they just had one tape recorder up there and it was hooked up to the mixing board. But like the microphones were amazing. The mixing boards were awesome. There was a whole crew of people on a like rotation schedule. It was important. You had to be there early, had to set it up, had to do all that stuff. And then there was digital recording tapes at the time. And there were two of them. So you had recording one that started. And then about the time that the word started, you would record number two. And that way, when you flip tape one or replace tape deck one, you didn't miss a second. It was everything was recorded. And then there was an analog backup inside that had the same system of flipping the tapes and making sure that was in there. There was somebody noting every cough and every sneeze and every moment and every person that came up to talk. It was all being preserved for historical record and for the importance of the word. And then on top of that very expensive audio booth that was functioning up there. There was a Marantz recorder, which is just a portable tape recorder, sitting on the pulpit, just in case the power goes out or something.
That's how important this word was to preserve.
It followed Gary to and from the service. So if he had a conversation afterwards, or if he did a moment of ministry or something like that, there was somebody to record everything that he said. The same thing with John Stevens. That started with John Stevens. Marilyn was also the one that like spearheaded all of that, and Rick was the one that made it happen. It was essential, and it was drilled into our head. And then everybody bought these tapes and the This Weeks and all this stuff. You can see the organization. This is from a former member who did the organization. It's all cards. I'm so sorry that I'm going on a rant about this right now. It is all these organized cards of the old
card
catalog and all of this stuff. They printed out the catalog that you could take home.
And say why this former member said that they were collecting all of this.
They were collecting it. That's what they told me. They were collecting because someday somebody's come knocking on their door for it. It ended up being me. But
for a different purpose than they expected.
The world, it's that we each had to have our own library of the word to preserve it for future generations. It was essential to preserve this word. The word working was essential in this.
It was all about that. I mean, he's like diminishing it down to, it's just for distribution so people could listen to it later. Like,
which just makes it sound like, you just did this to make money? This was just for selling cheap tape?
Yeah.
This was so important. And I will, go on to say there was, which he kind of covers in here a little bit. I think we cut it out for a number of reasons because it's a little confusing. But essentially there was a vault also in Shiloh where they kept all of this stuff. And it was Library of Congress level preservation. It was climate controlled, light controlled. It was fire protected. It was an important place to keep this stuff. So it's, that was really the purpose of it. Distribution. No.
Laughable.
All right, let's go on. Jesus. And here's JRS's word is not crucial.
Was disseminating John Robert Stevens' word an important facet for the Living Word Fellowship?
Yes.
In fact, it was a crucial facet for the Living Word Fellowship, wasn't it?
No.
It was not a crucial function?
Again, see the rant just before this. Go on.
It was not a crucial function of the Living Word Fellowship to disseminate the word of John Robert Stevens?
Objection asked and answered.
There were many. Oh, sorry.
There were many crucial functions of the fellowship.
I'm not asking about other crucial functions at the moment. Right now, I'm just asking about this one. Was the dissemination of John Robert Stevens' word through the churches and the fellowship a principal function, a principal purpose of the Living Word Fellowship of churches?
It was the principal function of the Living Word and the churches in the LA area. The 3 churches, yes.
What about the other churches? Was it a principal function of the other churches to receive John Robert Stevens' word?
It's their choice to do so or not.
Okay, so you can be a part of the Living Word Fellowship and not give a flying fuck about John Stevens' word. Okay, sure.
So just so everybody knows that was, if you were a former member, you didn't actually have to care about John's word. Just apparently.
Yeah.
Go on.
Surprised?
Surprised.
Okay, so this is kind of switching topics a little bit where Gary's trying to downplay the importance of his
it's a continuation,
being the vessel of the word, right?
That's right.
So how many tapes containing words that you delivered were stored at Shiloh?
My best guess would be a few thousand.
Like 3,000, 5,000?
No, a few, probably 2.
2,000. 2,000 different tapes?
I believe so.
That's just an estimate, right?
Yes.
How many tapes were there from John Miller?
Objection. I don't know.
Do you have an estimate?
No.
Do you think it's less than 10?
I don't know.
Do you have any reason to think it's in the thousands?
No reason to think it was in the thousands.
Any reason to think it was in the hundreds?
I don't know.
Have you ever seen a catalog for the tapes?
I have seen the catalog.
Do you remember seeing John Miller's name hundreds of times?
I don't remember.
Did you ever see any names other than your name or John Stevens' name or Marilyn's name that appears hundreds of times on the catalog of tapes?
And there's no more pages after that on that section, but
the point
is that, like,
who's the guru?
Who's the guru here? Exactly. Was any of the other, he mentions John Miller because John Miller comes up in other places, and so he knew that he was a relatively important member of the leadership. And he's just like, well, did you ever record his stuff and preserve it to the extent that you were preserved and John was preserved? Come on, Gary.
Right. Moving on.
So now we're trying to figure out, this is what the question will set us up here. Go ahead with 119.
What is the Apostolic Fathering Ministry?
It was more of a designation of respect to say that the person is maybe senior in their experience and walk with the Lord over time, or their anointing, their enabling by the Holy Spirit, and their experience in the church.
Did you use the phrase walk with the Lord for a time?
Yes, I still use that term. That term, by the way, is very biblical.
Thanks, Gary. Other than that, has the Apostolic Fathering Ministry ever had an oversight function over the Apostolic Company?
The oversight. The way the Apostolic Company functioned was normally with those who were designated as apostles and pastors and prophets. And generally, everything was brought to the table in meetings or whatever, again, to be prayed over, because, as the scripture says, by the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, every word shall be established. So you're always looking to have a process of confirmation among the ministries, whether that was a local church setting or whether it was in the Apostolic Company setting. It was a group of those who were at the time, and that changed over time. Many times it would be over 25 to 30 individuals who were involved in the meetings to be praying or to be talking over areas of direction or ministry or whatever. What we looked for was the Holy Spirit to bear witness to us and to see a common witness among us of the direction that was to be taken.
Okay, other than that, did the Apostolic Fathering Ministry have an oversight function over APCO? I'm talking about at any time, was there an Apostolic Fathering Ministry that had oversight over APCO at any time?
You have to define oversight.
Have you ever used the word oversight as the Apostolic Fathering?
But there were many.
Hang on, let me finish. Have you ever used the word oversight to describe the Apostolic Fathering Ministry function over APCO?
I don't think I can answer it in that form.
Have you ever used that word?
Love that question. I've used the word oversight, yes.
Have you ever used the word oversight to describe the function that Apostolic Fathering Ministry has over APCO?
No, I can't answer that question.
You don't know if you ever used that word in this context?
Not to define a hierarchy, which I feel is where you were trying to go with this.
Are you trying to suggest there was no hierarchy within the Living Word Fellowship?
No, the whole government structure was a hierarchical form of church government. But to say that the Apostolic Fathering Ministry dictated the moves of the decisions of the Apostolic Company is absolutely incorrect. Okay, so that's at the beginning of his deposition in this whole thing. Like we said before, these conversations are intertwined with all the other conversations that we've read with you, and we're just condensing it on the topic of, in this case, the Apostolic Fathering Ministry. And it is that thing of like, but to say that the Apostolic Fathering Ministry dictated the moves and decisions of the Apostolic Company, which is the broader church leadership, is absolutely incorrect.
That's
let's see what all this means. And we get to learn a little bit right now about what the Apostolic Fathering Ministry was, why that term came up, and most importantly,
how did Marilyn come into power?
How did he
into
and
that
Marilyn
position?
come into that position? Exactly. So let's get that question.
So dial it back. When did you marry Marilyn?
I believe in 1984 or 85.
Do you remember what part of the year?
It was in March.
Do you remember the anniversary date, the day you got married?
I believe it was St. Patrick's Day.
March 17th.
Yes.
I circle that one on the calendar. You don't remember if it was 84 or 85?
I'm sorry, I don't.
Was there anything going on in your life that might help you narrow it down or specify, rather, which year it was?
No.
Did you date for some period of time before you got married to Marilyn?
Well, John Stevens, who she was married to, passed away in June of 83. And so I would say we began dating maybe 4 months after that.
Okay, did you date for more than a year or less than a year before you got married?
Less than a year.
So fair to say you got married in 1984 then?
As well as I can remember, as I said.
That's fine. I'm not trying to trick you.
No, I'm not trying to stonewall you. I just really have a hard time with dates and that type of thing. So it's not something I generally remember.
Yeah, no one remembers.
No one remembers
when
their
they got
anniversary.
married.
Yeah, that's right.
Understood. So what I'm going to try to do is this. In that circumstance, like I did, I'm going to try to walk through piecemeal and see if that helps.
Certainly.
So John died, was it around June 4th of 1983?
That's correct.
Is that the actual date?
Yes.
Oh, so he does remember dates.
Oh, apparently.
Your best recollection is a few months after that, you started dating Marilyn.
Yes.
You dated for less than a year.
Yes.
You got married on March 17th. Is that right?
Yes.
So if you started dating a few months after John died, that would have still been in 1983, right? If he died in June and you started dating 4 months later, that would take us to about September, October 1983.
No. If he died in June and we were married in March, it would have been 84.
Right. I'm saying 84 as opposed to 85.
You said 83.
Thank you for correcting me.
Yeah.
So you started dating.
It's so annoying because like he was right the whole time. The lawyer was right the whole time. It was 83. They started dating just 4 months after John died and then got married the next March, which would have been at 84.
Right.
Anyways. Okay.
So you started dating sometime summer, fall of 83, got married the next March in 1984.
Yes.
Did you have any children with Marilyn?
No. We didn't have any natural children between us. No.
Prior to your marriage with Marilyn, you referred to being married before.
Yes, I was married.
Who was your wife before? What was her name?
Donna
Did she use the name Hargrave?
Hargrave.
What was her maiden name?
Donna Bling.
When did you get married to Donna?
Probably 72, 73. No, 72. It had to be earlier.
Other than Donna, had you been married prior?
No,
How did your marriage with Donna end? In divorce?
it did.
And when did that happen?
That happened I'm not sure the final date, but it was begun in 83 and probably ended in 84.
Interesting timing. Close in time to when you married Marilyn?
Close, but we were divorced obviously before I was married.
Obviously, yeah.
Obviously.
Hi, Ziggy. Certainly. Do you have any children with Donna?
I did.
How many children?
One.
Son or daughter?
It was a daughter,
What was her name?
Dawn.
When was she born?
She was born probably in 70. Well, probably in 80.
70-something or 80?
80.
Okay, what was her birthday?
I don't remember.
Do you remember what part of the year? Summer, fall, spring?
I do not. Okay. So that was interesting. I think we've never really heard Gary talk about that.
No, and there's a little more.
Is there a little more?
Just a little.
Okay, go ahead.
Do you still have any contact with Dawn?
I do not.
When was the last time you had any contact with her?
Probably when she was a couple years old.
Okay, was it before or after John died?
That I was in contact with her?
Yeah.
It was after.
Okay, do you remember how long after?
I was probably in contact with her on a regular basis because I lived in the home and she was in the home.
Okay, this was during the process of divorcing?
Yes.
Okay, I think what's interesting about that is like he abandoned his daughter when he ran off with Marilyn.
Yes, that's right.
He never saw her again.
Yeah. Do we have that part in here? I don't know if it, I think it was one of those little sections that was kind of somewhere in this. Where Ziggy, do you have to poop?
I know he keeps farting. I smell it. He's just gassy. It's
okay,
fine.
that's fine. What's interesting in here that we're seeing with this is that like he was married, he got divorced right before marrying Marilyn. He had a 2-year-old daughter that he bailed on in that divorce. And I don't know if we actually read that little bit, but he also does acknowledge in here. Yeah, he says, I've never had contact with her after the fact. Mm-hmm. So he completely was gone from them and went and lived the rest
of his life. The high life with Marilyn. Exactly.
Okay. And that was definitely something we never heard that story.
Right.
From anybody in
from the pulpit.
From the pulpit. Definitely.
Hey,
from the pulpit.
everybody, I'm Gary Hargrave and I abandoned my child.
Yeah.
Exactly. Ziggy's getting in all kinds of trouble.
I know. He's just a little...
He's restless.
Yeah, buddy. Why don't you relax? You want to come up here and sit with me?
So now we're going to talk about John's passing.
Yes.
Incidentally, earlier we were talking about John's passing. When did John become ill?
It would be speculation, but he was diagnosed with cancer.
Do you remember how long he battled cancer before he died?
Was it
about a year?
Can I guess?
You can estimate.
Okay, estimate. I would say 3 or 4 years.
To your recollection, were you aware that he had cancer prior to him marrying Marilyn?
Yes.
So it was several years then?
Yes.
And at some point, he became quite afflicted with the illness. Is that right?
The last 6 months of his life.
Okay, and the part we found interesting about this is like, I never knew that Marilyn knew he had cancer before she married him.
Yes, it's very interesting. Mm-hmm. It's very interesting because they were married for like 2.5 years.
Yeah.
Barely 3 years before John died.
Yeah.
And so if he had cancer for 4 years and she knew that he had cancer, it's just interesting.
Yeah.
All right. So then let's jump over here
John
to when
away.
John dies.
So he's referring to the Blix house, which was the house that John Stevens owned, and he used it as like people lived there, but the Blix girls, the word workers, the offices.
It was next to John's house. So John had a private residence, and then this other house next to it that he used as an office. And there were Blix girls there, and there was the tape recording. It was basically the Living Word facility before the Living Word facility was really actively used, and then it still stuck around for a long time after that. But he died over at the Kling house, and so the question here is about the assets and where they went.
Do you know what happened to the Blix house after he died? Who did that pass to?
To my knowledge, everything passed to Marilyn.
Everything passed to Marilyn.
Question 18.
Did Marilyn say something to you about it after his death? Did you ever see any documents that showed that the title transferred? Did anybody ever say anything to you about it? Anything like that?
That was the end of it. I think that was one of those ones that was cut off.
That was
no answer.
Yeah, but our point was to say, everything passed to Marilyn when John died. So
Yeah.
she knew he was sick. He's already way older than her. She knew he was sick when she married him. She marries Gary like immediately.
Immediately after John dies. They start
dating like months before, which it's been rumored that they were.
There's more to the story, possibly. Which
connect the dots, people.
But according to Gary himself, it was 4 months after John died they started marrying they started dating, and before Marilyn married John, she knew he had cancer.
Yeah.
Okay,
so then we're talking about the whole commissioning, which Gary and Marilyn claim that on his deathbed, John transferred the commission to Marilyn and Gary.
Yeah, so that's the story that the church told. They're actually referring to the bio on Gary and Marilyn's website, which there's a whole section in here which you just don't have time to read, about how Gary denies having anything to do with the website titled GaryandMarilyn.com
and copyrighted
and
Gary and Marilyn Hargrave.
And then the lawyer shows him like at the bottom, he's like, do you see at the bottom of this page it says copyright Gary and Marilyn? Anyways, interesting. So now they're reading from it.
Now, in the next paragraph, it says, John Stevens, prior to his death in 1983, commissioned Gary to carry the mantle of speaking the living word to the fellowship of churches. So this is from the bio on GaryandMarilyn.com.
Yes.
Okay. Did he do that?
Yes, he did that.
Describe how you were commissioned in that fashion. What happened?
John was in the process of dying, and he stated from his deathbed at some point that Maryland would be over and responsible for the churches, the oversight of the churches, and that I would be responsible for continuing the ministry of the word.
That happened in the same conversation?
Yes.
How soon before he died?
A week, maybe more.
Was that written somewhere?
No.
Was it recorded?
No.
Why wasn't it written, if you know?
Because he was on his deathbed. Whether somebody took a note, there were witnesses there.
Who were the witnesses?
Dr. Bob was a witness.
I think there were others in the room. Dr. Bob was a witness. I think there were others in the room. At the time, I don't remember who they were, but there were people there who heard John and on multiple occasions say that Marilyn at his deathbed would be responsible. At the time, did you have any type of relationship with Marilyn?
A business relationship, yes.
Business. What was the business relationship?
Just working together in the word and the services. And at that time, meetings that, and I think that's another one of those ones that just cuts off.
Cuts off, yep.
Okay. Bink.
He goes back to talking about the website, the bio says, he commissioned Marilyn to oversee the administration and spiritual direction of the Living Word Fellowship. Do you see that?
Correct.
And that's accurate, right?
I believe that's accurate.
So Marilyn was commissioned to oversee the administration of all the churches. Is that right?
Yes, of the fellowship.
And when we say the fellowship, we're talking about the churches within the fellowship, right?
Right. But
not only that, but the projects of the fellowship. Is that right?
No. Again, the churches were formed as individual and independent corporations. So this terminology to me would be of the spiritual oversight of the whole, but that did not give her any kind of legal or other ability to go in and dictate the actions and directions of the specific church.
Which in practice is not how it worked at all. They had a say in everything.
It's all of this stuff. Again, it's just so this, what you're seeing in so much of this stuff, you see that he accepts it, John passed the commission, commissioned him over the word, commissioned her over the responsibility. The assets went to Marilyn. And then she got that what is that signal, the Apostolic Father in ministry, basically she was supposed to be spiritual, but then he's denying that there's any kind of legal requirements or any kind of like tangible
or any real power.
It's just a spiritual thing or whatever. So he keeps doing that, and it's just so like,
and
come on, dude.
I know. And also I find it strange that they, like you've mentioned this before, they recorded everything.
Yeah.
You don't think that would be, and like you said, they would carry around the stupid little tape recorder when John spoke or Gary, you don't think that his deathbed commissioning would be
recorded?
It's kind of important. It's a big deal. I mean, I realize it's like a delicate situation, but even legally, and I think that's why John Stevens' family ended up suing over the assets because...
Yeah, which they mentioned in here at some point, just briefly, there was a little bit of that fight that was happening in there. The other thing that was in there that was interesting, just because, there's just been like that kind of rumor and assumption that Gary and Marilyn were, hooking up and hanging out more than a business relationship before John died. He's just saying here it was a business relationship and they didn't start till 4 months after.
Of course.
So, we'll see how that all works out for them.
Okay.
Okay, so now this is more on that commissioning of the
Marilyn.
Yeah, go ahead.
Now, when he died, did Marilyn become the Apostolic Fathering Ministry?
She did at some point. I don't remember how that was done paperwork-wise, but definitely she became that. She took that place.
Did he commission her for that?
Yes. I mean, to me, he put her over the spiritual oversight of the fellowship.
When did you take on that function?
I don't recall. At some point, she felt like she needed to begin to disperse that. And as a woman, she felt like she needed, as a woman, I'm kind of anti-woman. As a woman, she felt like she needed a covering because there were a lot of male ministries that were attacking her competency to be that.
Okay, so did she commission you for the Apostolic Fathering Ministry?
As far as I can remember. Okay. Is this more of this?
It's talking about commissioning.
Commissioning. So this is the, like, what does it mean to be commissioned a little bit? They get some clarification. There's some interesting stuff in here. Go ahead.
If you commission somebody to be over a particular function of the church, would it be your expectation that everybody act in accordance with the commission?
Well, when you say everybody would recognize it, everybody never does everything.
Fair, but that wasn't my question, though.
Okay.
My question is, as the person who's providing the commission, you have an expectation that the congregants will recognize that person, correct?
If I commission somebody, I would expect them to go do that job.
Okay, so the commission has meaning within the fellowship.
Yes.
It's an important aspect of the fellowship.
Yes.
When the head of the fellowship commissions somebody to do something, there's an expectation that will be done, right?
I think it's misleading to say the head. It could be the whole apostolic company. It could be the local church elders and pastors that were capable of commissioning somebody into something. So I feel like when you're stating it in that way, you're trying to make the head something that it's not necessarily a correct position.
Again, he's like really trying to evade that the idea that he was the head.
Exactly. Okay.
So we talked about the transfer of the Apostolic Fathering Ministry function, right?
Yes.
This Fathering Ministry clause, this is a fair representation of what John Stevens' vision was for the Apostolic Fathering Ministry function. Is that fair to say?
As far as I know, the purpose of this was, as I've stated, the churches, and this was happening actually in Washington, Iowa Church, right down the street, where the pastors, which happened to be family members of John Stevens, his father, brother-in-law, and sister, were getting together, taking the church and the assets of the church, and the congregation was not in favor of that. So this was, again, a move that was being done to thwart the ability, of a board of directors to do that without some type of outside approval or involvement from outside fathering ministry, advisory council, APCO, whatever.
So he created an oversight structure?
Exactly.
Okay.
So
that's how it was conceived of.
Yes, that's right. Okay, here we go. What is 305? Finish that. It says, is this correct or not? The oversight function, effort to take away all the control of the outside local churches and all that stuff. And he says, no, not take away all the... Can you read that question at the top of 305, actually? Yeah. I think that's right.
And so the oversight function was an effort to take away all of the control that the local church had in favor of having an outside oversight to make sure that misconduct couldn't happen?
No, not take away all of the authority of the board of directors and the local ministries. It was only to stop the misuse.
So there would be an oversight function that would almost give a veto power in the event of misconduct, but the Apostolic Fathering Ministry wasn't running the day-to-day of the church. Is that fair to say?
Yes. So now we've drilled down. So all before it was like Apostolic Fathering Ministry, it's just a spiritual thing, blah, blah, blah. But now he's finally getting around to saying, yes, there was a veto power.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, there was a thing. And he keeps trying to do that thing of like, no, it's just that they're trying to steal the churches. And so it's just a protection for that.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, there was this veto power, which we're going to see how broad that is. Okay. Let's see what this is coming to the end here. So what we've turned a corner a little bit in the way that they paint these. It's really great because they've slowly painted Gary into a corner
Mm-hmm.
where at first he's like trying to deny that the Apostolic Fathering Ministry has any power whatsoever. He's not important. The word's not important.
This is a great point to read this little tiny expert then.
Yeah,
he's
that's
like,
right. It's like, yeah, go ahead and read that.
He's like, so you didn't see like XYZ coming, you didn't see them coming from the sanctuary, and
he was asking about something specific. He was asking about Rick
in the
like
audio
how
booth
involved
and-
was Rick? Did you see him going in and out of the audio booth and blah, 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 blah. And so
And
then the question
Gary
is-
says, and you did see them coming in and out because there were separate entrances that you didn't see from the sanctuary.
Yeah. And then Gary says, can I have the page? Or do you want to read it?
I have both of them.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so then so what was the question again?
It's Gary starts.
Line 6.
Oh, okay. But I assume you're not in the sanctuary all day. I mean,
No, I was in the sanctuary, on the platform, or I was going home. And we just like that because it's so funny. It's like a little true in the sense that like Gary would just kind of show up late and then like
oh
bounce.
yeah, and they would just
But-
be in the green room. They fucking had a green room.
Yeah, but it just sounds like he's just like, I don't know, I just showed up to the platform, and I was done talking, I took the fuck off. I had nothing to do with anything. It's just like so dumb.
the whole way through, he just made it sound like he didn't give a shit. Like he was just barely involved or
Yeah,
something.
and what he was saying, like nobody really took seriously. It wasn't important, like all of that stuff. So
Yeah.
now we're getting to the lawyers have pulled out the bylaws. They've pulled out the org charts. They've got the receipts.
Yeah.
And they're going to ask Gary some questions about this. So let's pop 374.
This is where he talks about Hargrave Family Ministries.
Yes, that's
Yeah. Now, these bylaws, for now, the Hargrave Family Ministry bylaws are somewhat different from the other bylaws that were adopted by the churches in the fellowship. Is that a fair statement?
I don't know. I haven't read them through. I'm just in charge of Hargrave Family Ministries.
And that's interesting that they created this whole other entity, Hargrave
Yeah.
Family Ministries. And like my mom, for example, certain people tithed directly to
Yeah.
Hargrave Family Ministries. So then the Living Word Fellowship had no say in those
Well,
funds.
so that's what's interesting about, just to talk about that a little bit. So what they do have in here that they kind of verify is that Hargrave Family Ministries was a conversion from just one of the churches that John had.
Mm-hmm.
So John had a church in Anaheim. It was one of the main churches. Gary was pastor of that church for a minute. And then they shut down that church in the 90s or late 80s. And but they kept the organization just dormant. It existed, but there was no church, no physical building or congregation assigned to it. And so then Gary resurrected it later and renamed it Hargrave Family Ministries. And what the lawyers are pointing out about their bylaws is that, okay, if this is just another one of the Living Word churches, how come it doesn't have to submit to APCO?
Mm-hmm.
It says in the Hargrave Family Ministry title, a Living Word organization or a Living Word corporation, and which I've seen in other documents. Sorry, I'm just throwing that in there.
Yeah.
And so it's like implying that this is, it's just one of the Living Word, but it's not submissive to APCO.
No,
in
it's over
fact,
here.
what he goes on to say, or what we just did see.
Well, and we didn't highlight
we
this, but
didn't
he says it's somewhat different in that the other churches submit to the oversight of the Apostolic
Yes.
Company, whereas Hargrave Family Ministry does not. Is that a fair statement?
Yes. Instead, according to these articles, the Hargrave Family Ministry is quote, providing the overseeing apostolic family ministry function in the churches of the Living Word Fellowship. That we're supposed to read all of that. That what he's saying there is that the Hargrave Family Ministry organization was the Apostolic Fathering Ministry.
Yeah, it
function.
says that, and yet
Yes,
they're not
Yeah.
obligated to submit to APCO.
That's right. Okay. So they're setting that up. Let's talk about this APCO 1992 org chart.
All right. Does this appear to be an APCO organizational chart from August of 1992?
Okay. So those watching, we are showing the org chart.
Okay, and the box at the top and the middle, who is the organization, or what is the organization that is listed at the top of the organizational chart?
I believe it has a hole through it, and it's a bad copy. But I believe it says Apostolic Fathering Ministry, comma, G and M.
And G and M would be you and Marilyn. Duh. So you don't have any power, and you're not in charge of anything, but
you're at the top of the org
top
chart.
of the org chart.
Yeah, it's actually a really interesting looking org chart when we looked at it. It's very clear. I mean, they're right at the top.
Bink.
There's a straight line down. It says APCO and all of the APCO crap, and then it's all the churches underneath that. It's a very clear, like, just chart, just who's at the top.
Yeah. And I think, it's funny. You could say like, oh, sure, in any entity, you can have the president and then you have the board of director or whatever. And but everybody has a say. The thing is so in theory, yes.
Yeah.
But in practice and how we all experienced it was like Gary and Marilyn always had the final say in everything.
Yeah. But then this is what's great about this is not only did they have the final say in all of our experience in spiritual but you could argue, maybe there was some behind the scenes stuff that they had to talk with APCO or whatever and like get the confirmation as Gary says it. But like this is showing like it doesn't matter if they did or not. Like at the end of the day, legally, they were also the ones that oversaw everything, had veto power on everything and totally controlled everything.
Yeah.
So it's like both our experience and the paperwork are in line. And Gary's over here like, nah, I don't know what you're talking about. I was in charge the whole time. What? It's so stupid. Okay, go to 482, right?
Yeah, so he's showing him an exhibit of a document signed on March 15th, 2002. Let me direct you to the first page, item number 2, indicating that you held the position of Apostolic Fathering Ministry as you've talked about, correct?
Yes.
And directing you to item number 3, you declare under penalty of perjury that by virtue of your position, you have the authority over the Apostolic Company, which is the overseeing body of the churches affiliated with the Living Word Fellowship of Churches, correct?
Correct.
And you signed that under penalty of perjury and filed it in federal court because it was correct and true at the time, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
So, and you can see it here. This was a part of actually a lawsuit that happened in Maui over property, et cetera. And he was dragged into court over that to be a witness and talk about, the need for there to be a church there and whatever. And along with it, there was just like
it was explicit wording.
That's just like, I am Gary Hargrave. I am in charge of everything. I have total sole control over this spiritually and what was the word? Temporally. Like totally control over everything to do with the Living Word Fellowship. Signed, big old Gary Reverend Gary Hargrave, like all of that stuff. And so like after all of this dodging and weaving, like, well, the churches could do what they want and blah, 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 blah. They're just like, well, then why the hell did you sign this piece of paper?
And they finally wear him down, right? And he's just like...
And it's so great because they save it for the end.
Yeah.
And it's just so fantastic. It's just lovely. Good job, guys. Not that you needed us to tell you that. I just wish I could have been in the room. And this is the closest thing you're getting to it. Okay. That last one. This is fun. Here we go.
So this is the apology.
The apology letter that that
Gary wrote
after
Shalom's letters came out and after everybody started saying this whole thing has been fucked from the beginning.
Yeah, it's really good. There's some good stuff in here. Okay.
So, in the next sentence it says, this is quoting Gary from his letter, I should have followed the voice of the Lord and the leading of the Holy Spirit and dismantled what I believe to be a sin of hierarchical organized religious systems. Do you see that?
I do.
What did you mean by the sin of hierarchical organized religious systems?
After Marilyn's passing, I was the only one who was an apostolic fathering ministry. And I believe that was wrong and unacceptable because it puts one person at a pinnacle of something, which I know that is an expression of hierarchical structure. But I think John Stephen's goal, as well as our goal, had always been to see others come up and even, as I said yesterday, outminister himself or ourselves so that it would become more of a body ministry rather than a hierarchical structure.
So did you feel that by having two of you at the top of that system, that made it less hierarchical?
No, I felt the hierarchical system was not working and was not going to progress from here. And that was based on meeting with the pastors that happened before this, all of this time.
And again, the incidents with Rick Holbrook, as we've talked about, they go back to the 80s. So we're talking about decades of issues. So did the problems with the hierarchical structure in your mind, when you're writing this letter, do they start in 2015 after Marilyn's death, or did it go back to the beginning when the hierarchical structure was created?
I couldn't pin a date on it. It didn't go back to the beginning. I don't know what that point I felt like it started moving in the wrong direction. Basically, the last 11, 12 plus years, we were working to create an authority structure in the church as well as the Apostolic Company that was far more broad-based. And that was another place I personally felt that I failed in my spiritual leadership, was the ability to impart, train, and enables others to come up in the ability. Okay, let's take a little pause right there. So he's saying that, like, you know, for at least the last 12 years of the fellowship, they were working, that he felt like it was bad and it needed to be, you know, dismantled in the hierarchical system or whatever.
While it's becoming more and more militant.
More and more
every
militant.
year.
What's interesting to me in my understanding of all this stuff and like reading through these things, it's like the last service that Gary brought in like October of 2018, right before Shalom's letters, before he released this thing, was the end of hierarchy. So it was like in line, kind of, he was talking about that kind of stuff. But there are tapes from the early 2000s, from the 90s, where he's like, hierarchy is not what it's supposed to be. John Stevens and Gary has acknowledged also, this was always supposed to be a movement without leaders. But everything he did, he used that to justify designated relationships and Elisha. This, like, you'll be able to walk into the sanctuary and you'll be able to see that we don't know who the leaders are because everybody's plugged into this chain of relationships and we're all plugged into like whatever. Nobody's a leader. But like, then why did you sit on this organizational chart of APCO and you at the very top of all of it for all of these years? And if you always wanted it to be a movement without leaders, you did 80 years of not doing that, which is a little bit more
polar opposite, in fact.
Polar opposite every single time, and stuck with it and did nothing to change any of that.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's pick up the last page.
And so the hierarchical structure actually goes to the beginning with John Stevens. Is that fair to say?
Yes, but not devoid of the presence of the Lord as it became. Okay, which we love. Take that for a second. So he's saying that under his leadership, it became devoid of the presence of the Lord. And I love that that is on court record.
I know.
According to Gary, the living word became devoid of the presence of the Lord under his leadership. That's, you know, I don't think anybody's really going to argue that.
So the structure begins to be in place at least as early as 1977, as we've seen in the documents, correct?
Yes.
All right. And that structure maybe evolves over time, but it is a hierarchical structure that persisted until 2018 when it was dismantled, correct?
Correct.
And the Apostolic Fathering Ministry was at the top of that structure along with APCO, correct?
Correct.
For the entirety of that period of time.
Yes.
I have nothing further. He finally
just admits that it's just that hierarchical structure
2 days of like,
him at the top, all of that, hundreds of pages, 2 days of depositions.
That said it all right there. Just stomp all the pages onto the floor. I never want to look at that again.
I know, Jesus Christ. Oh man,
that's
Charity.
Wild.
What do you think?
I just think it's really frustrating how someone who he and Marilyn positioned themselves in that way as the top dogs. Mm-hmm. She was the lamp of Israel. He was the vessel of the word of God. And then shit goes south and he's trying to deny all culpability by saying, I had no real power. I wasn't in charge. I didn't, I don't know what the fuck was going on.
My word wasn't nothing. I wasn't in the sanctuary. I would just go home. I didn't talk to anybody. I never said it. What I said was useless. Maybe they recorded me, maybe they didn't. I wasn't paying attention. Who wrote this website? Not me. I don't know.
Yeah, even the website. I've never seen it.
I never said just deny. And it's what it speaks so much to. There are just how I've always felt what we've talked about a number of times in this is it doesn't matter. The inconsistency we've talked about. I feel like it comes from a similar place where he will say one thing one day and then bring another word that just feels like it counteracts that. Mm-hmm. And it's always just well, I don't give a shit what I said yesterday. Just do what I'm telling you to do right now. Mm-hmm. And it's the same thing with this. It's so funny it's funny, but not surprising that he walks into their I mean, frankly, obvious trap. Like, they did a great job. I'm not trying to take that out, but like, you got a pile of lawyers here who have access to all the documents and paperwork. Like, you knew what you were doing.
Because he's used to being able to bullshit people.
He's used to be able to say what he said people would just do.
Yeah.
And so he thought he could come in here and just be like, no, I never did anything. And they just keep asking him, and he has to answer, which is what I think we're former members of the Living Word. Like, this is the kind of thing. It's so tasty.
It's so tasty. No one got to question Gary.
You didn't get
Marilyn
to question
before.
him. It's like he's a very important person. And it's like when you put him down on a table and force them to answer questions is like so. And he's never had to do that.
Never.
It's so
He's never had
nice.
to be held accountable for anything.
Yeah, and when he just finally has to answer the questions and then the documents show up and just be like, okay, so all the shit you were saying, like, why not?
Yeah.
Why don't you see these papers say something
and
different?
It's another thing that's really frustrating about all of it is like the lack of accountability, the lack of taking responsibility. Like, he does that in his apology letter, but it feels genuine. However, when you look at how things have gone down, and even him trying to cover his ass in this deposition, but also like it's just so insulting that here he admits like he fucked up all of it.
Yeah.
Finally, at the end, he admits that, right?
Yeah.
And like,
I mean, he admits, like, that's what is interesting you say about, like, the apology letter, you know, because we've had this talk before about it. Like, when you look at it, they're using the apology letter as evidence because he says, I was in charge and it was my fault that these issues persisted.
but then he kind of takes it back.
But yeah, then at the beginning of this, he's like, well, I wasn't really in charge, you know? And it's like, yeah, but you wrote the freaking apology letter that said that you were in charge and you did these things. And he's trying to like push back against that through the whole thing. And so much of the other stuff is just like, he's trying to deny that it was a cult and he was the cult leader. But what's interesting about it is when you do like look at that apology letter too, is it's like, he's not being specific in any way. He's saying, you know, which I think is useful in this context, but like on like a human level, he's just saying that he's responsible because he was in charge, but that he never admits that he had anything to do with it.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
know?
And then like his actions subsequent to all of this is like, you know, and this is hearsay, but we did hear from a former member that like Gary referred to all of us as dead weight. Now the dead weight is removed.
Yes.
We've mentioned that before. And, you know, everybody, because there is a group of people that are still loyal to Gary.
Yeah, and more than, yeah.
And what bothers me about that is it's like, okay, do you really feel bad, Gary, for how you fucked up? Because you still think you can lead some of these people.
And
if there was any real accountability, maybe you would be like, I don't belong in a
doing
position.
this. That's one of the things he said in the apology letters, that he was supposed to possibly retire or seek other means of whatever. But he just went on to keeping Hargrave Ministries alive. He named it instead of Family Ministries, it's just Hargrave Ministries. He's still a leader and like trying to be a religious leader.
It's a podcast
where he spouts a bunch of bullshit.
Groping in God.
It's called Groping in God. That was
Stole that from a former member.
Yeah,
you know who you are.
And like, so he's still doing it. He's just doing, you know, version 2.0 of his stuff. Every single week he releases I mean, I know we do our podcast, but his is a bunch of bullshit because it's just and he does his trips across the seas, and he sells a bunch of trinkets and shit on his website that he probably, I had nothing to do with that website.
And he like traffics donations to different organizations through his own website.
Yes.
Like, why is that necessary? Maybe just direct people, like if you believe in these organizations, hey, donate to this. Why does it go through him?
Yeah, it's not, he has these websites like, please donate to these organizations. But when you hit donate now, it just goes to Hargrave Family Ministry or Hargrave Ministries. It's just, he's still doing the same crap where he wants to be this like religious leader.
If he's a narcissist, it's like he's got to. I'm not saying he is. I don't know, but would be a guess.
And I think if you were actually taking personal accountability for the wrongdoings of the past, then you wouldn't be doing this.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Exactly.
In this other way.
And it's a bummer.
Yeah. He's just like, I was in charge and I should have paid attention. See ya. But instead, the reality of it is that he was involved. He he was deeply involved with everything. He had control over every little choice, every little person, all the way down. He made a chain of relationships so that everybody could be controlled by him at the top of the org chart. Like every single person all the way. And now he wants to be like, people could do whatever they want at any point and I didn't give a shit.
Yeah.
And it's just a lie. And that's the thing that's frustrating, is to think that he can just continue trying to, it's not that he's trying to avoid accountability. That's annoying. It's annoying that he thinks he can continue to gaslight us and lie that, like, just personally, that he had nothing to do with this and that you weren't supposed to take his word seriously.
And also note that he doesn't realize that he doesn't have any business leading people. He's still trying to do that. He's
still trying to do that. And it's awful. But I just think, as former members, like, the thing that annoys me is that he, through this deposition and through the questions that are being asked, is still trying to say, like,
it's not my fault.
Listen to what I'm saying. Like, you didn't ever have to listen to what I was saying. You didn't ever have to do any of this stuff. Our experiences as people that were supposed to listen to everything he said, he is trying to invalidate that all the way through. Like, all your experiences were wrong and not true.
You know what's interesting? I was just thinking about, it might have been less, abusive in some ways. Like, if they had just come out and said, this is what you have to do to be a part of this. Instead, it was so manipulative, so coercive. Yeah. It's like, well, you don't have to, but if it's like, just come out and fucking say it.
That's true. Yeah.
Then you're making like a solid decision. I cannot do this, or I can do this, where all this, like, these mind games just keep you so turned around. You don't know up from down, right from left.
Right. It's like, and that's kind of true. Like, if you did want to, like, if you wanted to actually have, like, a movement and, like, we were going to, like, change the world and this is, like, what God is trying to do. If you want to be a part of the kingdom and part of the body, and we are the tip of the spear about to, like, change the world through all of this stuff, then sign up, and this is what will be expected of you in this.
And then, like, it would be a more obvious cult.
It would be a more obvious cult. But it would also, almost in a way, like you're saying, be more
empowering, to the individual.
Yeah, it would almost be more respectful, is what I'm saying.
That's true, yeah, because it doesn't involve manipulation. It's just laying it out there. This is what I want.
And not to say anything, but the army, for example, you go to die in the army. Like, that's one of the things. Like, you might die. Like, things are not going to be safe for you necessarily.
You sign up, you know what you're getting into.
You know what you're getting into. That's not like. That's like, but you sign up and you make that, and they say, like, you're one of the best. You're going to go out there and you're probably going to get shot, but, like, we're going to do the best we can with you to, like, it's like, it's a clear thing. Instead of, imagine if the army was like, come on, join our thing. Like, it's, like, really cool. And, like, if you want to, it's, like, real safe and, like, real, like, awesome. Like, come here and be safe. And, like, you get to go in there, and then it's all just bombs and blowing up all around. Like, it's really shitty. And then afterwards be like, well, you didn't have to, it's like that it would be better, like you're saying, if it was a more obvious cult instead of this bullshit manipulation.
Yeah,
that,
because
like, was disguised.
That leaves less questioning for the member too. Like, where you're like, I think this is kind of off, but I'm not really sure. Where it's just, it could be more cut and dry, more straightforward.
Yeah, next time, Gary, more straight and forward. Yeah,
next time when you start your next cult,
get on this one, revamp your website to be like, hey, if you follow me, then, like, I'm gonna treat you like shit. Like, do that. We'd have a lot more respect for you.
Some people are into that, so
That's right. Probably get more followers.
Okay, we did it.
We did it. We're done. Until we do the next depositions, which there are a whole ton of them.
Oh my God. I need a drink.
Let's go. Let's get out of here.
Okay.
Thanks for listening to Oops, I'm in a Cult.
Please rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube.
Follow us on Instagram at Oops, I'm in a Cult Podcast.
Support us on Supercast by visiting our website at oopsiminacult.com to subscribe and receive exclusive bonus content.
Or email us at oopsiminacult@gmail.com.
Take it easy and don't join a cult. If you or someone you know has a mental illness, is struggling emotionally, or has concerns about their mental health, there are ways to get help. Use the resources linked in the description to find help for you, a friend, or a family member.